All right, man. Well, we'll just jump right into it, man. So I know Royce Gracie played a huge part in why you got into MMA. What was it about Royce that really inspired you to join MMA?
Well, I was small and he was small. So I remember watching UFC 2 when he fought, he just ran through all those different guys. And, MMA was a lot different than it is today. So it was no weight classes. And, when you see a 175-pound guy beat up all these big guys, you're like, damn, I weigh 120 pounds. I got to learn how to do that. So it just like resonated with me right then and there that I wanted to, that I needed to learn how to do this. So, the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm same thing. I'm smaller. Definitely never competed in the UFC. Never got there. Just do a bit of jiu-jitsu. But I feel that was one of the biggest things that got me onto it. That and Rampage Jackson was another factor that got me into the sport. A guy like that is just next level in terms of personality. When you look back on your career, is there one fight that stands out to you among the rest? Is like that one? There's something special about that fight.
Not really. I mean, I wish I could say that it did, but because like all of them have like some significance to them that made me who I am today, and it just so no fight really stood out because they all had like something special about them that I could look back on and go, yeah, that's what I got from that fighter. Yeah, that was cool. Or that was cool. Or that was cool. But I can't think of any one fight that just did it though. I wish I had one, but there was no one fight.
There is one fight to me that stands out, and not for any reason other than it's a win over a good friend in Matt Serra. How does it feel to all these years later be able to be like, look, I got this win on you, man?
Well, I'm extremely proud of that win. Not because, well, because me and Matt Sarah are like best of friends, but I'm extremely proud of that. And I got the tattoo to prove it. It says, "Hey Matt, I won." I probably can't see it here, but I got that. I got that on Dana White looking for a fight. But no, that fight was weird because a lot of things happened. Like first they raised his hand in the middle of the fight, the lights went out. I mean, it was just a wild event. But it was a good night. I think that not that I ever want to do it again. Matt would kick my butt now, but yeah, it was a good fight.
Speaking of Dana White looking for a fight, what's it like traveling all over the United States with those guys? I mean, Dana White, obviously, very, very big personality, and even bigger is Matt Serra. What's it like traveling with those guys?
It's crazy, man. Like you got to know your role. You got to be able to keep up, and that's the thing is it moves so fast. Like we'll be in the hotel and they'll be like, "Yo, be downstairs at 11." And if you're not up down at 11, they're gone. They're we're going to leave you. So it's a very tough schedule, film schedule, but they're a lot of fun. I mean, Matt's a lot of fun. If you never, I mean, if he's a friend of yours, you know what he's like. He's a lot of fun. He's always on. He's the only guy I know that's always on. I'm like, dude, don't you ever turn it off? He never turns it off. He'll call me up. He'll start off serious. Then here come the jokes. I'm like, you're always on. I don't know how he's always on, but he's so funny. He's funniest guy I know by far.
You've seen a lot of places. You've seen a lot of fights. Is there one place that you've been for Dana White looking for a fight that stands out among the rest?
Um, Obviously, I think Abu Dhabi. When we filmed over there, that was a place that I mean, it was just the only thing I can compare it to is like any image of heaven that you have in your head of what heaven might look like or feel like or be like. That's it. Because and part of it was because we got treated so good. Like the people of Abu Dhabi treated us like royalty, and we had a lot of leeway to do different things. But besides the heat, it was just like the most remarkable place. Like it seemed like everybody was rich, and it seemed like everybody had gold. Like the coffee like had gold in it, like gold chips. Like it was just like they were eating gold. Like what did that say about your economy when you eat gold? Yeah, it was crazy.
Onto your coaching career, which I think is kind of where you're at now. I mean, obviously you had so much success in fighting, but you're even having a lot of success now as a coach. Your style is very different because unlike a guy like Royce Gracie or a guy like Brock Lesnar or Daniel Cormier, you didn't have a set background. Like you didn't come from a wrestling background or a Muay Thai background. You kind of have it all. What does that mean for you as a coach, and how is it easier, or I guess even more difficult sometimes, to teach guys or to show them techniques without that specialty?
No, I think it helped me Yeah, when I look at a lot of coaches in the game, a lot of them come from backgrounds, like especially at this generation of coaches, because most of this generation of coaches come from a specific discipline. The next generation will be a little bit more well-rounded, but this generation of coaches come from a specific discipline for the most part. And what that did for me was didn't allow me to have a filter in which to process information through in terms of playing the game. For instance, in terms of like wrestling, let's say I had a wrestling background, I would always look at the game of MMA from a wrestling standpoint and go, all right, this is like when they shoot in on you, defend the shot like this. I never did that. I always looked at it like, well, if he's a wrestler, he's trying to shoot in on me, what can I use that he's not used to? I'm going to choke him. He's not used to that. He won't know how to defend that. I'm going to elbow him in the head. He's not going to know how to defend that. So by not having a background, I didn't process the information through that filter. So it was always open-minded in this box of everything all in one, as opposed to, okay, I'm doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this, doing that. So I think it helped me.
As for the fighters you coach, do you find it easier to coach a fighter who doesn't have a wrestling background, for example, or do you find it easier to just kind of pick apart someone who's so focused on wrestling and being like, look, you're doing this right, but it doesn't really apply to MMA? What's easier for you, just picking someone up from the start without any experience, or someone who's a specialist?
I mean, that's such a difficult question because there's so many different factors involved.
Yeah.
Because certain people like to do certain things. I mean, if at the end of the day, I would prefer to get somebody who's a decent enough athlete. They don't have to have a combat sport background, but just a good enough athlete that understands body positioning and the way the body moves, having decent balance. Because like you can have a background in wrestling, but if your balance is a little off, then or you can't stand in a position to throw punches, then I don't want you. So, so it just, what I would probably prefer to have more than anything else? Someone who can dance.
Like a Lomachenko type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because fighting is so specific to body movement and being able to create angles with your body. And that goes for punching, kicking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. It's all about body positioning and body movement. And dancers can really contort themselves and put themselves in positions that like most people can't. And we get it confused because we think that like big muscles is the thing that does it. That's not what does it. Big muscles that's the look, but really it's about positioning. And I think I would prefer to have someone who can dance.
Yeah, you see that a lot. Even I know Dominic Cruz doesn't have a dancing background, or at least I don't think he does. But his footwork is so unique, and I think that's a great example of what you were talking about.
Well, look at Israel Adesanya. I mean, he's a dancer, and when he's in there playing, you can't catch his rhythm, and he's in these different spots, and you can't find him. So I would much prefer to have someone who's got rhythm and can dance than someone who's wrestled.
Speaking of your fighters, you have one fighter fighting this weekend, I think, right? Jillian Robertson?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on her as a coach? And what have you seen developments in her game from her last performance where she lost to Macy Barber?
Well, first off, she can't dance. So that hurts. No, I'm just kidding. But she can't dance. But she's the hardest worker I've ever worked with. She's the most diligent worker that I've ever coached, which is why, when I left American Top Team, I was like, you got to come with me because like I need you because like you work so hard. Like you're the reason why I want somebody to work with, somebody who works this hard. And she's just the hardest worker I've ever, coached. And since I lost to Macy, well, the first thing is like I don't want to take anything away from Macy, but there were times in that camp where I was like, Gillian, you sure you want to take this fight? Because she had hurt herself, and she. And not that the fight could have been different, but we had to sacrifice some training for that fight. So like, there was some mishaps in training. We had to sacrifice a bit, but so we worked a lot in this camp and she hasn't fought since then. That was a long time ago. So since then, we've done a lot of stand up. We did a lot of work transitionally. We've just really sharpened her up in all these different areas and just gave her just this amazing confidence to fight anywhere and do everything. And she's as good as she's ever been right now. And she's in better shape than I've ever seen her in. So she's stronger. She's got better balance. She's even runs after practice, something she's never done before. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see her do her thing tomorrow.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great fight for her. It's a tough test, but I think she's shown a lot. Obviously, the Macy Barber fight, and I think anybody on that night, Macy looked incredible. So I mean, I think Jillian Robertson is very, very talented, and she's Canadian. So I've got a spot in my heart for her. I always root for Canadians. Another one of your fighters, Tyron Woodley. I love Tyron. I was really hoping he'd get back to his ways against Gilbert Burns, and taking nothing away from Gilbert. Gilbert looked really, really good. But what are your thoughts on Tyron? I know he's got a lot of criticism. People saying, like he's got one foot out the door. He's rapping. He's doing all this other stuff. Some people say, it probably makes his game better. As a coach and as a friend and as a mentor, what do you have to say, I guess, to the critics of Tyron Woodley?
Well, Tyron's a hustler. You can say what you want about him, but he's the most hustling guy I've ever met. Like he's a hustler, man. Like he's never going to be broke. He's always going to find a way to find the money, and that's just what he does. In terms of his fighting career, it's tough. When I was 36 years old, I had my last fight against Georgie Karakanyan, and I remember that fight. I remember being somewhere in that fight in the third round, just thinking, I don't really want to hurt this guy. Like, what am I doing here? I'm just cruising. And after the fight, I'm like, man, I can't believe I just let that guy beat me. And it just there comes a point in your life when you get to a certain age, you're just like, it's whatever. And I think Tyron might be battling that a little bit. He might be fighting that a little bit, where he's just kind of like, man, he's 38 years old. He's like 38 years old, and he's just like, man, is this what I really want? I mean, you see the difference, like in his eyes from now to from before. Like it's a different eye. I don't have to eye the tiger as much, but that doesn't take away from his skill set. The thing is that we just have to get that back. We just have to get that eye of the tiger back. And can it happen at this age? That's the question. I don't know.
What do you think would motivate him? Is it a guy who he hates, like a Colby Covington, or is it just something that's internal and he's going to have to figure that out?
I think he's got to figure that out, because if he allows Colby to motivate him, but couldn't get motivated for Gilbert Burns or Usman, that's a problem. That's a problem in itself. That's you got bigger issues than that. So, but I think it's got to be within himself to find it.
You have a former opponent of yours fighting this weekend as well, who's kind of arguably over the hump, just similar situation, in Clay Guida. What sort of advice would you give to a guy like that who's nearing the end, who's almost at 40 or whatever? As someone who left the game relatively early, what advice would you give?
Just be safe. The problem with Clay is that he's never fought safe, and he doesn't have a safe style, and he can end up getting hurt. The good news is that he's fighting somewhat of an older type guy too. Like Bobby Green's no spring chicken. Bobby Green has been around the block a bit, but Bobby Green can still do damage. Bobby Green is still dangerous. So for Clay, I would just say, just fight as safe as possible. But that's not really his style. Like Clay's always looking to entertain first, win second. So he's going to go, guns blazing. But if I was coaching him, I would just want him to be as safe as possible. Just don't get hurt.
One of the people you've worked with throughout your career had an incredible performance a couple weeks ago in Amanda Nunes. As someone who's seen her inside the gym, and as someone who's almost like a friend, what are your thoughts on her performance, and what do you think is next for her? Like, it seems like she's done it all. Like, she beat Ronda, she beat Holly, she beat every name that's ever won a belt. As a friend and as a mentor, former coach, what sorts of advice would you give to someone like that?
Well, she's great. I think I love Amanda to death. I still work with her a little bit. Like I do her scouting reports, and ever since I left the team, I still did it for her, for Felicia. She asked me, and man, like you said, Amanda's a friend of mine. She's great. I mean, I'm blessed to be a part of her success at some level, and I can say that I was a part of the success of the greatest ever, and she's just done amazing things. Now, Her fight against Felicia, I think that if she wanted to, she probably could have put Felicia away. You know, if she really was like, "Yo, I'm gonna hurt this girl. I'm gonna put her away." But Amanda has so much respect for her opponents that she's like, she's a nice girl, and I'm not gonna hurt her. I just want to win. You know, that's how she went into that fight, and it kind of showed. Like there were times where like Amanda just like backed off a little bit and just, I don't want to kill the girl, so I'm just gonna. But when she fought Cyborg, she was like, "Come on, I'm gonna kill you," and she did. So almost. But the only fight I was kind of critical of her was against the Jermaine fight. I didn't think she looked that great in that fight. Jermaine posed some problems physically for her that I don't think she was 100% prepared for. But she still dominated the fight. But I thought that she could have did a little bit better in that fight. That's the only fight I ever be critical of her with. But moving forward, I don't know. I mean, she might even just retire, you know. But I mean, but you don't know what a person fights for. If she's fighting for money, just keep doing it. But if she's fighting for legacy,
it's done.
It's just done. There's nothing else to do. There's no one even close. Like Jermaine was her last challenge, and like when you look at the next 10 girls in either division, there's nothing that is going to like motivate her that can seal the deal. Like it's already, the deal has been sealed.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, she's definitely in the Mount Rushmore for me of greatest fighters. I have her, I have George, I have Anderson, I have Jones. Who are your Mount Rushmore for? I mean, you've fought through an era with guys like Forrest Griffin and all these great guys. You grew up watching Royce Gracie, and now you're coaching guys in the Tyron Woodley era. So you've kind of seen all the fighters. Who for you would make the Mount Rushmore?
I would have to go Amanda, George, Jones, and DJ.
Yeah,
I go DJ. Yeah, it's hard because Demetrius is relatively irrelevant right now. Yeah. So it's hard to remember him at times. And from the outside perspective, you would look at his division and say, "Oh, that's a weak division." But I would say that his division, 125, in terms of like skill for skill, is as strong as almost any other division. It's just not popular, and so when Anderson was beating guys, they were popular. But I think the DJ's opponents were just as good, if not better, than Anderson's opponents.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, DJ was, in my opinion, the best martial artist of his era. The way he dominated fighters, it's just guys like Ray Borg aren't Forrest Griffin, you know? And I think that's the one knock on Demetrius.
Right, yeah, exactly. So you know what I'm saying? Like, Forrest Griffin isn't a better fighter than Ray Borg, like in terms of skill for skill. He's just name-wise. So you know, obviously Anderson gets credit for beating guys that were just more popular. And I don't want to take anything away from Anderson. It's just, you know, when he started fighting better guys and he got a little bit older, he's been doing it too long. So like to me, that just kind of takes a little bit away from him.
Yeah, I'll ask a couple more non-MMA questions here just to end it. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So obviously you're probably one of the busiest men in MMA. What sorts of things did you do in quarantine to kind of keep your mind occupied?
Oh man, we trained a lot. We trained. That's what. So you know, I quit my job like in the middle of quarantine, and so I was just kind of bouncing around, going from like gym to gym in South Florida with my little crew of guys that I had with me, and we would go to a gym and we would train, and we go to another gym and train. And then about the same time, Tyron Woodley was in camp for Leon Edwards, so I drove up to St. Louis with Jillian Robertson. We drove up to St. Louis, and then we trained at his place for 2 weeks and came back. So I mean, I trained a lot during quarantine. I really did. It was great actually.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I hear that a lot of fighters are like, yeah, we're staying busy as we can. I think a lot of them actually spent more time training, especially guys who have a job on the side.
Yeah. That's you know, and that's why I think before I was talking about Gillian, like she's so prepared right now because that's all we did during quarantine was train. You know, we would, you know, it was, you know, a lot of fighters that were at top team, they couldn't, but we did because we were just like, yo, set up, we're going to train now. We're training here. So she trained a lot.
One of the things I find is, especially like a team like Elevation, there's such a small group of guys. Do you think that's the future, having a small group? Do you think that's key to the fighter success?
It will always be that way. Um, the big teams help for resources and bodies, and it's just in bodies, and there's just a lot of resources.
Yeah.
But in terms of developing really good fighters, you're going to need individualized attention, and I think eventually it's going to turn into the boxing model, where if the thing is, like, if you're making $10 million a fight, you're not showing up to Monday's wrestling practice with a bunch of guys, a guy who works at Texaco. You know what I'm saying? You're not doing that. Like, if you make $10 million a fight, you're going, hey, I'm training at this time and I'm hiring these guys to work with me, and that's it. And that's really where this game is going into. It's going to be, camps are going to be built around the athletes. That's just the way it's going to be. Camps built around the athletes. But prior to now, it had to be the other way because nobody could afford that.
Yeah.
So it's going to end up being like this. Camps are going to be built around the athletes as opposed to athletes jumping into big rooms of people.
All right. Thank you for taking the time, man. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so I appreciate you jumping on here. I'm actually still a little bit shaky from interviewing you, man. But
get out of here!
Appreciate it.
Stop. Listen, you make sure you call me later, and we do this again sometime.
Yeah, we will for sure, man. I really appreciate it. All the best, and good luck with Gillian tomorrow night.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you. Thanks.
All right.